Hi, Matt.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Haven't seen you in a while.
I know, it's been a long time since we were at the New Republic together. And all kinds
Yeah,
of things.
those were the days, weren't they?
Exactly.
Back in, when you used to do your Al Gore impersonation?
It was once a bigger draw.
Surely you have a whole repertoire, though, of impersonation.
The moral animal. And Nonzero literally changed the way I saw the world.
Apparently not for the better.
No.
So listen, you will be familiar to many of our viewers, not for your impersonations, impressive though they are, but for having almost done serious jail time, and I think actually being found in contempt of court, right, during the Valerie Plame case when you refused to disclose your source?
Yeah, I mean, what happened was I didn't disclose a source, and then I was held in contempt of court, and it appealed all the way through, and eventually I worked out something.
Well, your source released you of your from your pledge not to.
Exactly,
yeah.
He did.
Although I'm not sure you ever publicly disclosed the source. This was grand jury testimony they wanted from.
Yeah, no, I did because you can discuss your own grand jury stuff at a grand jury. You can't discuss someone else's.
I get it. So it was
Carl Rove was mine, and I talked about it, and he almost faced indictment but didn't, and the whole thing ended sort of more whimper than bang.
Yeah, but you enjoyed the celebrity?
No. I mean, I won't say there wasn't a certain frisson at times of being recognized, but it really was much more burdensome than
I guess the prospect of jail time kind of takes the thrill out of being recognized at shopping malls.
It does. It does. You know, although it's funny with where I'd be recognized with DC's hyper-educated cab drivers who, if you don't live here, you'll note that they are well known for listening to public radio, although I've never been in another city where every cab driver listens to public radio.
I've never been in another city where cab drivers are so educational. I mean, if you interrogate a cab driver in D.C., you can learn a lot. I mean, they're usually from some exotic country, and they know the politics. They're keeping track of the politics there, I find.
You always learn a lot, but somehow the cabbies knew me, and they would always say things like, well, what happened to Bob Novak? I don't understand. Why are you facing jail time and not Bob Novak?
Well, good point. They made good points.
And they did.
But now you're at National Journal, right?
I am at National Journal. I am the editor of one of its publications, National Journal Daily, which focuses primarily on Congress. So spend a lot of time doing that.
And you're in charge of what, White House coverage?
Well, I'm in charge of the whole publication, National Journal Daily, and I had been the editor for White House coverage, so I've had my hands on
I see. So you're the guy. You're the top guy there.
No, I'm not the top guy, but I'm the guy of my little corner.
You're not above. Are you not above David Bradley?
I am
you cannot fire him?
I am always subservient to my boss and leader.
Okay. I was confused. I'm sorry.
That's okay. What are you working on, Bob?
Let's don't get personal, Matt.
Okay.
Let's just say you're doing a better job of continuing to make a living in the perilous, increasingly perilous world of journalism than I am. You sound like you've got a solid, stable way to make a living.
We are trying.
Yeah. So, let's see. Can you still hear me? I'm getting a little weird.
It's getting a little feedbacky, but can you hear me now?
A little feedbacky.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, how's this? Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're the problem anyway, but yeah, that is better.
Okay.
So this, let's talk White House then.
Okay.
So Obama gives this new Get Tough press conference yesterday, which apparently led to Mark Halperin getting suspended this morning.
Right.
And we can talk about that. But first, suspended from MSNBC. But first, what did you think of the Get Tough press conference?
Well, I thought he did a pretty good jujitsu move. You know, as they run up to this debt ceiling deadline, where they either raise the debt ceiling or where we become a third world country. You know, the Republicans have done a pretty good job of saying, why won't the president cut spending? And they've kind of made it a spending argument. Mm-hmm. And they've kind of dominated the scene. He did a big kind of jujitsu move yesterday. He said, well, look, these guys just want to preserve tax breaks for corporate jet owners. He invoked corporate jets at least 5 times yesterday, by my count. They want to save all these crazy tax breaks for gazillionaires, and if we do that, we're going to have to cut food safety and medical research. He invoked all the most popular things that government can do. I thought it was a reasonably effective way of framing the debate. I don't know how much it does in terms of actually getting everyone off their positions enough to get a deal, but at least as a way to appeal to the public, I thought it was pretty well done.
Yeah, but has he given up totally? You follow these things like way, way, way more closely than I do. Has he given up now on rescinding the Bush-era tax cuts for the rich? Because all he talked about at that press conference, I gather, is tax breaks.
Well, I think that's off the table for a while. I mean, I think his position is still, I signed this 2-year extension of the Bush tax cuts a while ago. I really only want them for the middle class. And I'll never sign an extension again. But that's off the table for now. I think no one's thinking about income tax rates because it's not going to happen. So the question now is the Republicans are saying any change in the tax code, deductions, depreciations, whatever, anything that leads to someone paying more tax, we consider a tax hike and off the table. And that, I think, Alan Simpson was on TV this morning from Aspen calling that ludicrous. And that's a pretty hard-nosed position. So I think Obama's trying to get the tax code, deductions, and things like that back on the table because you can pick up some serious revenue if you put that stuff in play.
I guess, but
not as much as rates. I mean, income tax rates are still a big thing.
Tell me, why did he cave on that? Is it because he didn't think he could win in the court of public opinion, which I think is totally wrong if he thinks that, or is it because of donors, campaign donors?
Well,
or something else?
I don't think his donors were crazed about having their. I mean, I think that his donors would have given him a pass if he could have raised rates back up to 39%, 36% for top earners.
So why did he cave?
Well, I don't think he had the votes. I just think even though we were dealing with a still Democratic Senate and Congress, because remember this all happened during the interregnum between the election and the Republicans taking over, he still didn't have enough votes, really. I think
but if he says, look, I will veto any deal where spending cuts are not mirrored by rescinding the Bush-era tax cuts for the rich, over my dead body, you will do what you want to do. He doesn't. It's just a question of staring down the Republicans, right? I mean, can't he just refuse to play ball? He is the president. He can veto things.
Well, there's no question he could have let the cuts expire, and he could have had a kind of huge conflagration. But there was not. I think even the Democratic Congress would have kept all those rates in effect. There just wasn't enough votes there.
This is just pathetic.
But look, that's where we were then. Now we're just now we're talking corporate jets and accounting tricks.
Yeah, I mean that's too.
Otherwise, I mean, I think the thing we're losing sight of here is that we have to have this whole debate because for the first time the debt ceiling is being used to kind of hold the government hostage. I mean, no one's ever tried this before. And we've had kind of showdowns about government shutdowns, but those are small potatoes compared to this thing. It's a much bigger implications. The numbers are much bigger. Earlier this spring we almost had a government shutdown, but, moving a few billion here, a few billion there on a Friday night, and they got a deal. Now we're it's a lot more at stake. A lot more at stake if they don't get it done because of what will happen to the markets, supposedly.
Yeah.
And a lot more at stake just in terms of total number of dollars because the Republicans are not saying we can be bought off for a few billion here. We want trillions.
Yeah, it's true that I guess, when you combine the prospect of a government shutdown with the prospect of not being able to service our debt in the current global climate, this is kind of an almost unprecedented amount of budget drama, isn't it?
It's really, it takes, game of chicken up to a new level, and especially when a lot of Republicans are saying that the August 2nd deadline the Treasury has set is not real now. Most Republicans, Eric Cantor told one of our reporters this week that he takes the August 2nd deadline seriously. Most Republicans in the leadership take that as a serious deadline, but there are a lot of Tea Party types, like Michelle Bachmann and others, who are saying, you know what, it's not a real deadline. You could pay interest here, you could do a little this, a little of that, sell the Grand Canyon, whatever. It's not a real deadline. But that's the kind of world we're in at the moment.
And so meanwhile, on this, so Mark Halperin comments unfavorably on the wait, first let me ask you, how do you think this is going to, I want a prediction or something. How is this going to play out? What's
well, I love the politics of this, because if a Fox News contributor the year before president's reelection, let's say 2003, a Fox News contributor called George W. Bush a dick.
Had it happened.
I don't think they'd stay on. And so he's going, MSNBC has cast itself as the liberal network, and so how's this going to play? Because he took it right to their base,
Yeah.
So I don't think it's not just if he'd said on CNN, the politics of this would be different. But the fact they said on MS, I think makes it a little harder for them to keep him. But I don't know. On the other hand, I tend to. I'm of the forgive indiscretion school, so I don't.
Do you know what aspect he was commenting on? I mean, he was saying that Obama had been a dick at the press conference, right? Which meant what exactly?
I have not watched the clip. I don't know. I gather it was somewhat premeditated, like they were kind of building up to it, so it wasn't like it was something that flew out of his mouth. I confess to once having used the word prick on CNBC, and no consequences faced.
Wait, what's that? Repeat that.
I used the word prick on CNBC.
Did you really?
Several years ago. Well,
in reference to whom?
No, I was quoting a David Marinus' biography of Bill Clinton, in which he came across a letter that a young Bill Clinton wrote and described then vice presidential nominee Bob Dole as a prick. So I mentioned that. I was talking about the Clinton-Dole relationship. I mentioned calling him a prick, and there was some. I should have done better. There was some, even though it was basic.
You should have. I actually think you owe America an apology. And if you haven't ever delivered it, I think now is the moment, man.
Well, I'm ready now. 15 short years later to.
Yeah, that's going pretty far. I mean, what's funny is how. It's about just the way the meanings of word changes. So to people in their 20s, calling someone a dick is just like calling someone a jerk to people of our generation, right? I mean, it's lost all obscene connotation. Just the way, like, now you can say you're screwed, whereas for a while, 30 years ago, that was a little dicey because people were still thinking about what it literally meant.
No, that's true. I think a douche would go in that category.
Yeah, and so it's like always evolving, but you got to keep track of that. And also, I mean, Halperin is of the generation. He should remember when you wouldn't
have said that. He's a 40-year-old man, I think, at least, right? So
no spring chicken.
He's in his 40s. Yeah, this wasn't. Well, I don't know. I mean, I personally don't want to see someone, canned for an offhand comment. And, if you're a repeated serial offender in the Mel Gibson vein, it's a different thing. But I think if you're, I wouldn't fire him, but I think the politics of MSNBC will make it harder.
You think he'll go for good, really? You could look at it the other way.
I kind of want...
Couldn't you argue that they don't want to be typecast as the Fox of the left, and they will
right. Well,
forgive?
That's true. That they could do that.
I mean, they're not the Fox of the left, first of all, and the Scarborough show itself is testament to that.
No, they are not. They're not the Fox to the left, but they, I think they have certainly cast themselves one way, and they will, I think, be mindful of it. I don't know. Are they owned by Comcast yet? Is it a GE decision or a
I have no idea. I lose track of all these things. I just, and I mean, and MSNBC, the TV station, and MSNBC, the website, are not owned by the same people anymore, are they?
That I don't know. I think they are. They didn't used to be, but now they are. But
that's over. Well, it's one or the other. I know. Either they are or they aren't. I'm sure of that.
Right. Right.
Like, what else in the world? So, this is a good chance for you to bring me up to speed on the Republican presidential candidates.
Sure.
The
basic caveat is it's all kind of idle speculation and chatter so far from the primaries, and things change.
Sure, but there must be people who you
some
are
guy
sure
wins Iowa and then he gets clobbered a week later in New Hampshire. So given that huge disclaimer, I think the most interesting things are, I think there's a real media love affair with John Huntsman.
Yeah, I like him. He's a good-looking guy.
I mean, I lived through the Bruce Babbitt campaign. I've seen this before. I mean, anyone who seems to take on their party's orthodoxies gets a lift in the media, and he seemed to have done that on things like climate change or other things he'll probably wind up backing off of now. So I think you got a media love affair with Huntsman. Whether that will be enough to actually translate into a Republican love affair with Huntsman remains to be seen. Bachmann is, as my colleague Jim Fallows wrote, is put together very good performances in these debates. And she,
well, there was the John Wayne problem.
Yeah, it's true. There was the John Wayne, but she's, generally she's presenting better as time goes on.
Right. She has not confused an actor and a serial killer since that one time. She hasn't done that again.
That is the only time.
Yeah.
So, she's, for now she seems to be the proxy for kind of Tea Party anger and the more angry part of the party, and Mitt Romney, the more staid part of the party. But, that's going to change and evolve, and I think people are amazed that Pawlenty, who seemed positioned, seems to have just kind of continued to fall.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see, and we'll see, of course, if Rick Perry gets in, and whether that's sort of a George W.
Signs are that he will, right?
It sounds like he's making moves in that direction. And, I guess he could sort of pick up the traditionalists and the Tea Party types. And
we dropped the phone connection there, but you were talking about Rick Perry?
Yeah, well, Rick Perry, I think, we've elected a lot of governors president. And
some from Texas, even.
Some from Texas.
Doesn't always work out well from my point of view, but...
Yeah. Well, there's certainly a lot of Bush-like qualities to him.
What are they?
I think a certain cockiness. I think he looks a little like Josh Brolin as he played Bush in W. And there's even some physical resemblance. I think he's running to the right of Bush, though. I mean, Bush, we forget it now because he became so hated by the left. But, in 2000, he wanted to keep the education department, and all the other Republicans said you got to get rid of it. And he was anti-abortion, but he was like, I don't want to try to overturn Roe. We got to let hearts and minds change. And he had a number of positions that sort of signaled moderation, even if they then got changed later in office.
Mm-hmm.
But Perry, there's none of that. It's just,
red meat,
hardcore conservative red meat. So we'll see.
And he's a hawk on foreign policy, I take it.
This is what I read.
Yeah.
This is what I read.
And do you know? A number of candidates are trying to pick up on a certain weariness with and wariness of, I guess, American intervention abroad. And
right.
Do you think that's big enough to matter, that sentiment among Republican primary voters?
I suspect it probably is. I think after 10 years of the 9/11 wars, there's a general fatigue, and I think the Bin Laden thing, getting killed, helped exercise that. And I think there's an audience for it. And I think especially they're all over Obama for the Libya thing, because they just hate they hate the blue helmets, NATO, multilateral part of it. I mean, they may be wary of Iraq and Afghanistan, but they really hate that part of it.
Well, that's what's kind of ironic, because a certain amount of this is driven by fiscal conservatism. They don't like the money we're spending, and yet, in theory at least, of course, multilateralism is a way to share the burden. And Libya is actually an example of that, in a way, although it has other problems.
Yeah, no, we're not kicking in that much, but I think they hate the whole NATO part of it. So yeah, no, I think it's look, and I think the White House recognizes this. I mean, I think their withdrawal is is made for policy reasons, but I think they're also mindful that people want to get out.
Yeah, I think
also,
so.
You can't pay for this stuff forever.
This is becoming clear. And I think, if this is a big sentiment, it seems to me like John Huntsman, one thing you could say for him is he's kind of the grown-up version of this. I mean, he really knows kind of the territory. He was an ambassador, and, I don't think, I doubt anybody could get away with calling him some kind of flat-out isolationist, No, he's not kind of a Yahoo isolationist, and yet he's very skeptical of military commitments abroad.
No. In fact, I hope the next WikiLeaks dump is his cables with Beijing and back to the State Department about Afghanistan, because China does share a somewhat small border with Afghanistan, has states in the region, and I'm sure he was the guy one of the people who had to sell the Obama policy to Beijing, and I'd be curious how he did that.
That is interesting. So you don't have a prediction on who's going to actually win the nomination?
Well, if you're going by history, you'd sort of say it's, in the end, the most establishment guy usually prevails. And that would be Romney, probably. But
would be Romney.
Who knows? I don't know.
That's something we have in common.
That's sort of a dodge.
Now, is this Sharia scare that a couple of them are playing on, is that going to be a big thing, you think?
Like Sharia law?
Yeah. I mean, aren't like Bachman or is she? I mean, I know Sarah Palin has played that card. Herbert Kane, kind of.
Oh, right. Well, that's true. The sort of.
And Gingrich, to the extent that you want to consider him a serious candidate, he's been all over that. Yeah,
I think with the Mormons in the race, Huntsman and Romney, I think they're going to be a little more wary of that. Mm-hmm. I think also because they're smarter than that, but I think also, they have to make a case against religious prejudice. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have to overcome some prejudices. So I don't think wading in those waters suits their needs. Yeah. And I think that'll help keep it to a minimum.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the presidential race before we move on?
Well, I guess sort of wonder if is Obama going to be the first black president to get reelected? I mean, that's not just rhetorical, but is he going to? Is the idea of having the black president taken away and thrown out of office going to be incendiary and inspiring enough for people to turn out in the big numbers? Or is there going to be feeling like, well, we already climbed the mountain, so who cares? I mean,
that's a
my
good
guess
question.
I can't weigh hearts and minds, but my guess is the idea of if he starts to make a "don't go back, let's not go back" claim, that's on one hand an argument against going back to Bush-era economic and foreign policy, but also an argument against repealing my historic victory, then I think that will be a potent message for a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people who after all that hope stuff, don't want to see him fail.
At the same time, I would think a lot of the Democrats who were most enchanted by the prospect of a black president are the ones who are the most disenchanted with his performance. In other words, they tend to be on the left side of the party.
Right.
But you may be right that when push comes to shove, I mean, it's easy for them to whine now, but then when when we're into the general election, it's us against them.
Right.
Maybe the very sentiment you're describing will kick in. I don't know.
Right.
But there are a lot of people unhappy with him.
There are a lot of people unhappy with him, but I sort of wonder about the minority turnout. Can the idea of having it all taken away be as much of a motivator as electing a black president? And I don't know the answer. But given their electoral strategy, that they're sort of, trying to break out in places where they haven't before, not just Virginia and North Carolina, which they managed to win last time, but try for Arizona, maybe even Georgia. That strategy depends on that level of enthusiasm staying high. I'll be curious.
Well, it depends partly on black turnout, right?
Right.
Are you talking about both black and white voters?
I'm talking about really minority, black and to a degree Hispanic.
So you are mainly talking about minority voters faced with the prospect of a black president not being reelected. You're talking about them. Okay, I wasn't clear on that. Okay.
Yeah, I am, because there's been such a collapse in sort of white working class support for Obama that he's kind of left with a coalition of minorities and more affluent whites. And so he's really got to keep those minority numbers up high. And, I wonder whether the prospect of him going away is as much a motivator as keeping him in. I'm not saying that very well, but you know what I mean.
No, that's an interesting point. I hadn't heard it put that way. And I kind of think maybe on the economy, I mean, people talk about, how low can the unemployment rate be by the time the election rolls around. I think almost as important is whether things are clearly getting better. And that may be his salvation.
Right.
It certainly could be the case that 6 months from now things are clearly getting better. But if they're not clearly getting better a year from now, he's going to be in trouble, I think.
Yeah, I think he's certainly miscalculated talking about recovery summer and being a little too optimistic too soon.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. So I was gratified in our email exchange to hear that you actually want to discuss this Google, the Google Plus thing, their assault on Facebook.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I figured people were following it. Do you have a take on it?
I kind of read these blogs, the kind of tech blogs and the social media blogs, and I'm fascinated by it just because I think Facebook has just a nearly impenetrable, defense. I mean, it's one of those cases, the technical term is positive network externalities. That is to say, the more people who use a product, the more valuable the use of the product is. And Facebook is as clear an example of that as there's ever been. That the case for joining Facebook is that all the people are already in Facebook. And by the same token, the difficulty any rival faces is that the first people who adopt the product are going to be adopting a not very useful product, since most of the people they know will not be using it. I mean, so that's the first thing I'm curious about is what strategy they have for overcoming that. It seems like
it seems like they've already got a gajillion people using Google, so it's not like they're not totally starting from scratch, right?
No, that's true.
But
at the same time, let me put this to you. How much better than Facebook would this have to be for you to start using it, even though only 1/3 of your Facebook friends will be your friends on this product, right?
Right. But I think it is getting at well, first of all, a couple of things. I mean, big things can collapse, right? I mean, MySpace just got sold this week for a pittance and it once seemed indomitable. So things, and Microsoft, of course, we've seen has fallen on harder times, and it once seemed indomitable.
Yeah, I would say Microsoft certainly didn't have nearly as strong of network effects as Facebook, and maybe I'd say the same about
that's fair. That
MySpace.
maybe is
but
not
anyway,
as
go
analogous.
ahead. Yeah.
But anyway, so things fall, and then second, people are using Google tools all day. So if it was easily integrated into Gmail or the search or other things beyond my capability, then it wouldn't be as big a reach as if you were, some other company, some media company, just suddenly creating this product out of ether. Finally, I think there is this kind of basic flaw in Facebook, and I use Facebook a lot. There are things you want to share with some people that you don't want to share with everybody. And Facebook, you can sort of, parse out some people. They only see your photos, but they don't see your posts, and you can do it, but it's very cumbersome.
I've never even tried it. It's so forbidding, yes.
And Jim Fallow's written a lot about this, that he sort of gave up Facebook for just this reason. Things you want to share with these people, but not these people. And I think if they have an easy way to do that, it can be successful. Of course, it sounds like something Facebook could just adopt and crush them with, right? I mean, if Facebook just
Right.
wised up to this basic problem, then there wouldn't be a need for the Google.
Yeah.
And maybe
No, the interface seems good in that regard. It's like it's a drag and drop thing. You take a picture of a given friend
Right.
and you create a circle and you drag them and drop them into this circle. This circle could be like, my soccer buddies or whatever.
Right.
And it just seems like it's almost the entry point to the whole process is to kind of categorize these people and it's in a very intuitive way. That part of it seems great, but I agree with you that, like, what's going to be hard is for them to become a serious threat to Facebook so fast that Facebook doesn't have time to just emulate any of the features in the Google version that are really popular.
No, I agree. I mean, it's hard to think that Mark Zuckerberg and company are going to let this just go.
Yeah. But at the same time, I've always thought Facebook was not all that well designed from a user-friendliness point of view. And it's just, when you think about it, it's kind of weird that like, you really don't know, when you do a status update, you don't know which of your friends it's even going to go to, in the sense of making it into the news feed, and you don't understand the process by which it's determined which it will go to. You know? That's weird. That's weird. But I agree with your early point is, like, I mean, except in more extreme form. One reason I almost never use Facebook is, if you look at all the people who have become my friends, relatives, who are like hardcore Southern Baptists, in Texas, and colleagues and friends and people I don't even really know. There's nothing I want to say to all of them. Not one thing. There's no part of my life I want to share with every one of these people.
Except to sell books. I mean, book promotion.
What?
Book promotion.
No, I know. And yet at the same time, you kind of, when people use it only as a promotional tool, you
want to kill them. Right.
You tend to shut them down,
Right.
So, I don't know. But, I think one thing Google has going for, just to quickly get back to Google, is, on the one hand, Gmail, it seems to me, is essential here, because it is through your Gmail contacts list that it's easiest to kind of draw other people into the network, I think, if you're going to try this.
Right.
Now, the bad news is Gmail actually has pretty small market share. I think, Hotmail and Yahoo both have more users by a long shot. The good news is that Gmail has a very elite user base. So to the extent that these things kind of spread from the top down, so to speak, with, the rich and the famous and the literati being emulated,
I think
then Google is in a strong position. And in a way, that's what happened with Facebook. It started off at Ivy League campuses and then spread to other campuses and then spread beyond campuses.
And MySpace did become the down market.
That's right. It became like because kind of what an AOL email address became.
Right. And also what was once seen as a deficit of Facebook, that you couldn't change the background, became a huge asset because people on MySpace tricked theirs out so much that it sort of diminished the whole experience for everyone.
That is a good point.
You don't want to bet against Google, but I'm also one of the people who begged to get Google Wave. And then
Wait, I missed that part. What'd you say?
I was one of the people who begged to get their last hyped product, Google Wave, a couple of years ago, which turned out to be...
Yeah, the last couple of efforts haven't worked out so well in the social space. So are you... I presume I should be following your Twitter feed, right? You must have you must have a Twitter feed, and B, it must be good, right?
I'd like to think it's moderately interesting. Matt is Coop. It's actually derived from an old
That was your email address.
That was my email address at TNR when we were there. Yeah.
For a while it was an AOL email address, right? Mattiscoop at AOL.com?
Yeah, with a Z. MATTIZCOOP at...
Okay. So now that is your Twitter feed.
Twitter. That's my Twitter, yeah.
And we should encourage people to...
by all means.
To follow it. And, are you okay with this whole internet thing? Is it working for you?
Well, yeah. I think we're trying to figure out how to make money doing it in journalism, and I like these interwebs.
You like the interweb.
I'm very pro.
And,
I'm very pro the interwebs. I love that there's never a barroom argument anymore. You know, anytime people
because you're
disagree
never in
about
the same
something,
physical space with people.
No, I like that. No, whenever people argue about who won the 1937 World Series or whatever, somebody will take out Google and.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
that's true. Those kinds of disagreements.
No argument goes unsettled. At least when it's.
That's a good point. But isn't Twitter kind of a burden? Once you develop a following, don't you feel that there's this expectation that 90 minutes will never go by without you commenting on something?
I don't feel that pressure. I go pretty long periods without saying anything. I do. I do feel like there's always a conversation in my pocket. I know that sounds like a bad, dirty joke, but there's a.
I was wondering what I thought we were heading into Anthony Weiner territory.
No, I do think the degree to which your friends are curating the news for you. Like, I will find things out on Twitter before I'll see them on the web, and
sure,
I will find interesting things all the time because I follow people who are interesting, and I think it's like having a news curator. You know, so I like it for that function.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's the reason that news sites, media properties in the old sense or in the early internet sense, are kind of having trouble because there's less and less need to go to any site. Who needs the New York Times homepage as their kind of aggregator, as the thing that tells them what's important in the world, when you've got these smart people scouring the entire media landscape and bringing to your attention.
Although it can also be a huge driver of traffic to these sites, like
it can, but I guess that's the thing. I mean, increasingly, that's how those places get their traffic is by referral. In fact, I think there aren't many new properties that are managing to develop a homepage that becomes a landing site. Some of the old properties still have some of that, but that's getting harder and harder to do.
I think the idea that it's like the idea of appointment viewing on TV. And the idea that you're going to sit down and turn the channel and go to a place that's not. No, you're going to get driven there by somebody. But
right.
To the extent your friends are driving you, I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess kind of what Google wants to tap into here, in terms of advertisers and all that stuff.
Well, I may have to start tweeting in earnest at some point, but that moment isn't here yet.
Okay, well, we wait. You can do this.
I'm letting the drama build.
Okay, well, we'll have countdowns.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I want to thank you for
Bob,
doing this, Matt. It's great
it.
after a number of years.
It's been too long. All right.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna start following you. You will feel my presence.
Okay.
And I hope that alone does not put too much pressure on your tweeting. Just knowing that I'll be watching.
I think I already follow you. It's Nonzero.
You follow me?
Aren't you Nonzero?
No, is somebody using
what's your
that?
handle? I think so.
No, I am. I actually, my if I ever tweet it, it would be under, what is it? It's Robert Writer, WRIGHTER.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I'll follow the real you.
You follow the real me, and if I ever start tweeting, you'll be among the first to know, and I'll start following you, and that'll be our deal, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks a lot, Matt.
Take care, Bob. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.